meeting to order at 6:31 on October the 11th. So I want to make an apology to all those that celebrate Yom Kippur, that we kind of spaced on this starting at sundown the night before Yom Kippur, so I apologize. And our policy actually requires us to meet every Tuesday, the second Tuesday of every month at 6:30. We have to do that. So we need, are you in charge of policy?
We talked about it today.
So we need to probably address our meeting time today to allow flexibility. Excellent. Community comments? Is there any? Okay, CSA comments.
So we've had a busy start of the year. We have a lot of new families at Pine Hill. So one of the things we've done this year is we have a new family committee that was started this year, and we try to pair not only the new kindergarten families, but families who are new to the community with an existing family, kind of as a buddy system. And we had a event where we coordinated and had all the new families come, and it was lovely, a pizza party. So that we feel like we're trying to include and inform people who are new to not only to the school, but new to the town. We did our introductory teacher luncheon, our back to school luncheon, and we did our teacher stipends, as we do every year, and the teachers seemed very appreciative. We've already thanked us all for that. The CSA is launching a new website, which Dr. Brown I'm going to tell you all about. It's going to be launched also off of the Dover Sherborn website. It'll launch to ours. We have it now so that we can receive our emails better, and we're putting all the bylaws, the finances, everything on it, so it's all accessed with the minutes. So that's our other new initiative. We've had our 5K, which was very successful. It was very well attended. We had our new assistant principal run, and we had a lot of walk-up people come and run that at first we were worried, do we not have enough sign-ups, but there at the end it got very, very busy, so it was very well attended, and we had a lot of nice sponsorships too from local community partners of business and things like that. So it's been a busy year. We're going to have some movie nights and things for fundraisers, and we're just excited. We're excited for a fun-filled school year with Dr. Brown. That's it. That's all we've got.
Thank you. Sounds great.
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Yes.
How did our assistant principal do in the
Very well. She did better than I did. I had a little face for that on Lake Street, so that was with my daughter and my 6-year-old or my 8-year-old son. So that was quite impressive of me.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. The reports. Starting with the principal's
The principal's report. I was excited to report to the school committee on some of the professional development that has been underway the start of this school year. We've shifted how we use some of our after-school time, which was used predominantly for grade level teams to work within their grade levels. And this year, through some of our faculty inquiry groups and some of the teacher leaders' suggestions to our faculty advisory committee, there was definitely an appetite for more cross-grade level interactions. So I reflected on some of the science professional development and of course the literacy coaching that we're continuing, but the opportunity for grade level teachers to work on areas of topics of interest for professional growth, not necessarily within their grade level teams, although of course we still have that structure through common planning time, but for folks to get together across grade level teams to have perhaps richer conversation about how to vertically articulate and align expectations for student learning, teaching practices, etc. I wanted to acknowledge the team that went to Challenge Success last weekend, and I was fortunate to be a member of the team the second team that Dover Sherborn sent to Stanford University. The extended team is meeting with the primary Challenge Success team next week, and we look forward to sharing ideas and determining next steps for, particularly for student involvement at the high school level and applications at the elementary school for Challenge Success goal areas and initiatives. Really, really exciting. And I gave a public shout out to Hannah Thompson, a junior at Dover Sherborn High School, who is a poised, bright, comfortable in her own skin young lady from whom I gained a lot of perspective last weekend. So it was very advantageous to have high school students among the Challenge Success teams out there. I wanted to point out that in 2017, Pine Hill School is going to be 60 years old, and it actually came up at a CSA meeting last week when we were talking about some of the historical perspective of our school and background information that grown-ups were interested in, and I said, oh yeah, our students will help us with that. We look forward to bringing some perspective of learning at Pine Hill over the last 60 years to you.
Just a quick thing. We also really make a point of thanking our custodial staff who keeps the school looking much younger than its 60 years.
Remarkable. In fact, we have a building committee meeting later this week, and we talk about needs for capital needs and maintenance needs for our school, and it marvels that our school is, in fact, as old as it is, and very functional, very shiny, and we didn't have heat last week. It's back on this week. They're very prompt and attentive to taking care of all kinds of details around the school. So that's an overview of what we've been working on the last month. Just one more point out, the parents that have served on School Advisory Council over the last couple of years will be delighted to know that we are ready to roll out phase 2 of our parents' access in the parent portal in Aspen, our student information system. We are finally poised to open the portal for report cards at the elementary level. So we'll be rolling that out this year.
All right, thank you. What do you want to do?
Can I ask a quick question? What's the feedback been about the open houses, multi-grade open houses? Has it been mostly positive? Because I've heard from some people who had kids in multiple grades that it made it difficult.
We used to hold 3 open houses. We've consolidated to 2 open houses. Other schools, for example, Chickering, hold 1 open house evening. We staggered the times. The feedback I heard, particularly from the parents of twins and triplets, is that it's challenging, but that would be the case nonetheless. We're trying to be reasonable about the number of nights that nurses, guidance counselors, etc., our support staff that attend open houses, and parent parking's a little bit tight, but everyone is accommodated. So I didn't hear any negative feedback about from parents not being able to reach multiple places. We staggered.
Right, I'll talk to you because I did.
Okay, we staggered across 2 different time intervals.
That's right. Thank you.
Beth?
So just a brief update of the K-12 Science, Technology, Engineering, Computer Science curriculum review. The survey administration is underway. Dr. Brown referenced some of the work that we're doing for professional development across Pine Hill and Chickering, looking at the life sciences and writing 1 unit across those. And you'll have a full report sometime this fall. We're working with Superintendent McCullough to determine when that will be. But that will look at the areas of teaching, learning, assessment, leadership, and professional development. So a comprehensive look. And I've spoken about that here, so any questions you might have about that. And the Qualified Peer Observers pairing is underway. That's part of the DS version of the Educator Evaluation System, where our educators on their year that they are not being observed can work with another peer. It's a great model where they're looking at actual research, looking at supporting that educators' goals and commonalities across the school. So it's a great program. Unfortunately, we still do not have enough qualified peer observers to implement fully, which is a full year model. So some are working in groups, some are working a half year. But nonetheless, I believe that the educators are finding a positive experience. We will again survey everyone at the end of the year, QPOs and the educators, to look at the effectiveness of the program. And if needed, we'll offer the course again for educators.
Is that an issue that there's not enough people that want to do that?
That want to become a qualified peer observer. I think it limits the amount of interactions you can have with a staff person because there aren't enough trained qualified peer observers.
And the main reason people don't want to do that, it's just too much time for the training.
I think it's personal. Sometimes educators feel as though that's one more thing I have to do in addition to some don't have the time.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this different from new teachers or young teachers having a mentor? This is a different program.
Yes, it is.
Can you share with us some of the feedback that you get at the end of the year, specifically like
Yes, it is.
QPUs? Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right. Christine.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be a part of the school committee here and to share my quick report. As you see in the packet, it says that I've been engaged in a lot of conversations. That's what my work has been for the last couple of months, to begin to understand the climate and culture of Pine Hill and all of the strengths that the staff have to offer the building. And it's just been an amazing transition. It's been wonderful to be a part of those ongoing conversations. They feel like they're becoming richer and richer as we go deeper and deeper into the school year. I've been a part of professional development at Pine Hill, so I was there for opening day, which was pretty exciting. I was at Pine Hill for the opening of the preschools, the open house in the preschools, which was a great opportunity to meet parents. I've attended the CPAC meeting and introduced myself to parents through that venue. I've been at IEP meetings, meeting parents through those venues. So I continue to gain information and understanding about the school and the culture, and look forward to using that information to build the budget and help move the district and the school forward in its agendas that have been established through history.
Thank you. Any questions? We'll hear more as the year goes on. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McCall?
Thank you, Mr. Godwin. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October meeting. My report is focused on three really follow-up items, that questions that were raised at the last meeting relative to the building rental fund, the development of a special education organizational chart, and the status of the Head Ingram capital project that was funded for FY17. I've provided some additional handouts for you. In terms of the building rental fund, well, first, let me just, I need to play teacher. There's two typos on the first page of my memo, and I apologize. On the building rental fund, that last sentence, the last time this fund was accessed was during, it should read 2014-15 school year. There were times when it seemed like the 2015 year, 16 year. Could have come in 2 years. But that should read 14-15. And then special education organizational chart, the organizational should be capitalized. Sorry. But in terms of the rental fund, we provided for you the first document that was attached. There's a resource that we use, but this came from, I think it came from the Massachusetts Vocational Educators Association, Administrators Association. There are, I don't know how many types of different funds that municipalities and school districts can create under state statutes, but there are dozens of them. On this page, you see two of them. The top one is called school rental. It's a revolving fund, and the very bottom one is use of school property. And so what I wanted to point out to you is that the building rental fund. That's what we happen to call it, but it's not the school rental revolving fund that is described on the top of this page. Our fund really comes under the guise of the use of school property fund. The school rental fund is specifically for those instances when a school committee is renting or leasing space to a third party in a school building that is no longer being used for school purposes. And that's specifically outlined in the statute if you go in and look
So
at
the
it.
classrooms we rented to accept the tax rate.
That comes under, that's a difference.
Okay.
That's different than that.
Okay.
So the use of school property is actually the fund that the school committee, when you talk about building rental, that's really the revolving fund. And that is utilized for when different groups use our facilities and pay a rental charge. Some groups might use it numerous times during the year. There might be occasions where there's an organization that uses it once. But based on school committee policy that identifies how much rent, if any, is paid, what other charges organizations may incur, for example, the cost of a custodian's time, and in some cases, the cost of utilities. So all of those funds are collected through that process, and that's what goes into the building rental fund.
It says that we need to have local acceptance. Is that just like a one-time that you establish the fund and then that's?
Yes,
Where does it say that? I see that on the school rental, but not.
and the local
Local
acceptance.
acceptance.
Okay.
the bottom is just-
So for some of these revolving funds, local acceptance means that it has to be established by that if it's related with, if the money needs to be further appropriated, that local acceptance is typically in a town, has to be by town meeting. So on a warrant article, the fund is established and it's a one-time thing. We have to do some research here to determine if that's the case. The use of school property, because it's managed by the school committee, and I'm still doing some research on that. We're not quite sure if local acceptance means town meeting approval or just school committee. And it could very well be just that it's accepted by the school committee. So we're doing some research on that, but that fund has been in existence for many years. Probably goes back decades.
And we call it the custodial revolving account, that's actually what it is, the name of it?
So
You
Well,
call
that's
it,
the accounting on the next page.
oh, that's what it's called in budget sense.
Yeah.
It's called a building rental in our fund account. We just call it the building rental.
But that's the same as what's
Yes.
this.
So the second page having to do with this is simply, this shows the activity of when the account was last year, which I mentioned was during the 14-15 school year.
So did we approve these expenditures, bottom?
I don't have the answer to that. I didn't go
But
back.
so that's the question, that's sort of the question, right?
Probably did, right, Barb?
My recollection is that you
Yeah.
did, yeah.
I mean, typically that is the case. There'd be a recommendation from the administration to expend funds from the custodial revolving account or the use of school building.
I specifically remember an executive session when we talked about school security.
I remember the video surveillance. I do remember that as
Yeah.
well, but I don't remember the other two. So is there a way that we could, though, continue to look at this to pay specifically for the custodial expenses of the rentals? A way to sort of pay to match that?
Right, so we were looking at to see if there were any events where we specifically paid a custodian just to be there for that event. And if so, we'll start charging them. One thing though, I think Scott, you had asked just sort of what our the typical rentals were in a given year. So you had a couple of anomalies because of the tech and accept. So in fiscal year 14, we had about $8,800 in rental revenue. The next year it went up to $22,500, and that's because you were renting 2 separate classrooms. And that was the year you spent the 14.7. And then last year you had a little under 15,000 because you still had the 1 tech classroom under rental agreement.
So normally it's,
So normally I think it's going to be probably under 10,000.
I will tell you, my experience is that anytime a custodian is utilized for a rental, and so there's a custodial charge, the custodial fee that gets paid through payroll is charged to this revolving fund. That's a pretty standard practice. Under those circumstances, the administration wouldn't be coming back to the school committee to approve that appropriation, because that's really one of the express purposes of this revolving fund. The time that the administration would come back and ask for school committee approval for expenditure would be for items that are outside of either custodial overtime or
office supplies,
well,
great lease.
no, I think really any expenditure out of this fund that is beyond custodial overtime or expressly related to the use of the facility for that particular rental, maybe a police detail, for example.
Anything beyond that should be approved.
Yeah, so
Okay.
for example, in my opinion, the expenditure that was part of the capital plan for FY17 for the installation of the mats on the gymnasium wall,
Right.
I think that's a very legitimate expense to be funded from the building revolving fund, given that the gymnasium is one of the most commonly rented or used facility by outside groups. So the school committee can use facility rental funds to maintain or upgrade facilities that are generally used over time for rental purposes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So there's some flexibility with these funds that we haven't utilized as much as perhaps maybe has been done in the past.
Okay?
Second piece is related to the special education organizational chart. So this organizational chart just focuses on the flow of responsibility around special education matters. I hope you can read it. What this indicates is that headmasters and principals share direct reporting with the Director of Special Education for the team chair positions. The administrative assistants would report right directly to the team chair with some coordination and reporting to the principal or headmaster. You'll see where the out-of-district coordinator reports to the Director of Special Education. The special ed administrative assistant up at the top, that's the individual that's located now in the central office. So that individual will report to the Director of Special Education. Does this make sense to people, the way this flows?
I would say it's not what I thought I heard last time. I thought I heard the team chair was the direct report to the principal. That there was communication between the team chair and the Director of Special Ed, but it was a direct report to the principal. The concern, I mean, I don't
No,
know. Did anybody else hear
the
that?
admin assistant. The admin assistant is reporting to the team chair as well as the school principal.
Yeah, I remember the explanation being more the principal was responsible for all people in the building. Like it was direct report relationship there, even though it was a special ed.
I thought that's what made it not a
Yeah.
conflict, I suppose.
I still don't see it as a conflict myself, but the director of special education will work with the school principal on the evaluation of the team chair. The director of special education meets regularly with the team chairs to discuss special education issues.
Right, so, but what we talked about last time in this, I think this is why Scott asked for it, was it was a little confusing to understand it, that there was communication between the team chair and director of special ed, but the direct report, that the principal does the team chair's evaluation. That was the direct report. So in this situation, I guess, with the relationship, that if the team chair seems to have an issue, where does the team chair go? So who does?
The team chair would go to the principal, and if the principal needs assistance, the principal would then ask the special ed director to help out.
It's okay, but it's different than what we heard last time.
I apologize for that. I thought that the focus was on the special ed administrative assistant at the last meeting. The school principals and headmasters are responsible for evaluating not only the team chair in conjunction with the director of special education as a secondary evaluator, if you will, but the principals evaluate the administrative assistants, whether they're special ed or regular or others. They're responsible for the evaluation process. There are going to be times when people communicate with each other.
We understand that. We understand that, but it's
I don't think it's clear with the dotted line here.
it's
that the
different
principal-
than how it was described. We understand that, and that's why we asked for the explanation. Is because of what's the difference between communication and report. So the team chair reports directly to the principal, and the assistant does as well, right?
Yes, the principal is responsible for all staff in the building.
Okay.
Yes, when the bottom line, that's correct. So the solid line should go from the principals and headmasters to the chair, and perhaps the dotted line goes from the special ed director to the team chairs. I mean, there is a special relationship there. We can't deny that. And if I led you to believe that wasn't the case, then I apologize. But the director of special education does work closely with the team chairs.
I think we expect that. That's why we were saying exactly how does it.
And I think, so you're saying, but because we're talking specifically evaluatory relationship, is the issue, what was that issue, right? As opposed to just straight communication?
Yeah.
Like you could be a colleague or there's a relationship, but if you're not being evaluated, then that doesn't fall underneath the legal issue that we were concerned about. Is that?
I'm assuming so.
Yeah, so I think that's clarified, at least for me it is.
Yeah, if I didn't make it clear at the last meeting, you don't need to be concerned about any legal issues the way that this has been done.
I think it was made clear, but I don't think that this chart helps.
I think
That's the only thing.
switching the dotted and the solid
That's
line.
very apparent. So I will go back
Switching the dotted and the
and
solid lines.
take another crack at it.
I think that's all that, it just exactly changing the solid to me means evaluatory. Yeah, a dotted means a business need relationship.
And you could use green instead of red. It just seems.
Oh. No, thank you for creating the picture to go with the explanation, so it was to remove any any question if someone else had to review it.
Well, I appreciate that comment.
Can I just
They're doing a good job, so I will endeavor to improve it.
After you've dealt with the dotted lines and the solid lines, however you want to deal with that, could we pass this on to CPAC? Because it's actually something that an organizational chart that they've been requesting.
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Then the third piece, I was asked about the status of the capital item around the head end room. So as I explained in my memo, that work's been completed. There was a sister project that went along with that, which was funded out of the operating budget, and that was the installation, the replacement upgrade really of the wireless access points. All that work's been completed, and as it turns out, the work qualifies for a special E-rate reimbursement that we have applied for and will receive. In order for that money to be received, you have to first show that it was funded, which it was through the capital plan. You have to document that the work's been completed, which it has, and at some point the town will receive that $17,000. So that E-rate reimbursement actually goes back to the town of Sherborn. And those are funds that I assume will be deposited. So that will go to the general fund.
So the reimbursement of 17,505 is relative to the total of the 24, which was the head end, and then is the
Yes.
access, whatever the access points are, that's
It's all part of the formula that was, that the E-rate reimbursement number is derived from. That's my understanding.
Just out of curiosity, how does that, the things that go back to the town, there was something else we talked about last time that goes back to the town. It's
We're
not,
gonna get to that.
Okay.
We talked last time about the tuitions that
Right,
we'll be
yes.
receiving
That's right.
from the town of Dover, and here's some good news with regards to that. But these funds go back to the town, very similar to the funds that were received under the Green Communities Act for the two projects that were done last year, the ventilation upgrades that were done, and the soffit work, removing that, upgrading those soffits, repairing them.
Right.
All that work that was done. Yeah, there was a significant grant, Green Communities grant. I think somewhere in the $79,000. So that money's, those monies come into the community and they go back to the town and not the school department.
That's something else, just as an aside, that we need to I need to try to keep track of on our capital plan, so we can share that with Sherborn Capital and Advisory about actually how much money we're saving by going through that extra effort, I guess.
Yeah, I don't recall, was the E-rate reimbursement something that we were aware of before the plan? It sounds familiar.
It's something that we did talk about as we were
We're
rolling that out.
anticipating some
Yes.
sort of refund.
And this reimbursement was a result of a change in how E-rate is being, how those monies are being funded and reimbursed back to the communities. When E-rate first started, it was all about being reimbursed for telecommunications cost, literally use of telephones. So that's now more evolved and more directly around how we use technology in our districts.
Any questions? All right. Item 5, school committee discussion on ballot question 2. This was an issue that Jennifer wanted to speak about. Jennifer?
I asked to put this on the agenda, and I prepared about 4 minutes worth of information, little background on the question, a little background on charters, and then why I think we should oppose question 2 and who else across the state is against it. So the reason I'm addressing ballot question 2 in this forum is that it's a statewide public education question, and our constituents look to us for guidance on education issues. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees makes it clear that one of our roles is to inform and advocate for public education to our local legislators and to our community. Question 2, as it is worded, would allow for 12 new charter schools a year, every year, forever, and provides no reforms or revenue sources. A little background, charter schools receive public funds but are privately managed. They're authorized by the state, and charters have been authorized over the will of the local people in some cases. Charter schools are not accountable to the taxpayers or to the democratically elected local officials. Their boards are selected by the school founders. Charters are funded by local property taxes from the communities where the charter students reside, but these schools and their management do not answer to the local municipality which provides these funds. According to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, currently Dover Sherborn loses over $14,000 a year to charters after state reimbursements, and across the state, public schools are losing $450 million a year. If the question passes, in 10 years, public schools could lose $1 billion to charters, and in 20 years, it would be $4 billion. So this question will have long-term implications on our budget and the public school funding across the state in general. My thinking is that we can lead on this now or react to it later when it may be too late. As I mentioned, this is a statewide vote, not just about Boston, though the Boston City Council and the Boston School Board have both come out against question 2. 96% of the state's students are in public school districts. 168 school committees have come out against question 2. So if we were to come out against question 2, we'd be in good company, including schools similar to ours, such as Lincoln, Concord, Sudbury, and Lexington. And not one school committee has endorsed question 2. The teachers' unions are the most talked about opponents to question 2. However, it goes beyond them. Community members all over the state have formed a grassroots movement against question 2. The MASC has taken an official stand against question 2, as has the Massachusetts PTA, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, Massachusetts Nurses, and the Massachusetts State Scientists and Engineers. Halfway done. In their press release, the state scientists and engineers wrote, quote, "Question 2 would shift focus away from improving our entire public education system to improving a small fraction. This does our future scientists and engineers a disservice," end quote. Additionally, our state attorney general has taken a stand against question 2. Interesting to note, on the yes side, the funding is coming largely from out-of-state billionaire donors, including millions given by the Waltons of Walmart from Arkansas. The local and national NAACP have called for a national moratorium on charters due to increasing segregation and point out their harmful disciplinary measures, with some no excuses charters suspending up to 60% of their students and counseling out others. Charters generally underserve disabled students and English language learners. Their wait lists have been exaggerated, as made clear by a report last year from State Auditor Suzanne Bump. Charter schools don't have to accept students mid-year, and some only take students in certain grades. She also noted that charters lack transparency and that it was difficult to obtain information from them. Along similar lines, the United States Inspector General just released a report that charter schools are at odds with the Education Department's goals and need to put controls in place to avoid waste, fraud, and abuse. There are many issues with charter funding, their governing boards, and their management that need to be addressed before we can responsibly consider expanding 12 a year every year across the state. That being said, a stance supporting no on 2 isn't anti-charter or against any parent or child at a charter. In fact, there are question 2 opponents that are on charter boards. What a no vote means is being anti-12 new charters every year forever with no reform or revenue improvements. The bottom line is that charters take away local control and shift money out of public schools, and that they need improvements before expansion. This is a statewide ballot question, and it falls under the responsibility of elected officials to take a position and provide guidance to voters. So that's my piece, and I think Greg had something to say, and then you're
Well,
talking about...
does anybody else have any? I do have a couple comments, but does anybody else have any comments?
I have a question. Just out of curiosity, what are those who are in support of question 2 using as their argument?
Many of them are saying that they're providing a better education in public schools. The data doesn't necessarily play that out because of the way they choose their students, the way they counsel out students, and the population of students is not always apples to apples in terms of from the sending district to the charter. The yes side, I don't know if Greg's going to speak to that, but you know, okay, I wasn't sure what you're going to say. I'm not sure what you're going to say, but that's one of the main things is the data has come into question if indeed they do. And often what the data is only test scores. So they may have longer school days, they may do a lot of test prep. So they may show better test scores on their slice of students that they do accept to charters. So that brings into question the whole test scores as relevant as the only measure for success of the school. So
I was just curious.
yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question that maybe Dr. Brown, Superintendent, could answer. Have you felt in the last couple of years, have you felt that changes in our district, losses to charter schools financially or otherwise?
No, I think it's clear that in Sherborn and in Dover, right now, there isn't much impact regarding charter schools, students going to charter schools. We have a few students
When charter schools do that.
And
from
that was the number you were saying.
both
So region, I
communities.
don't know if it's Dover or
Yeah.
Sherborn.
But so it hasn't impacted us, and it's not impacting, right now, the fact of the matter is it's not severely impacting communities like our two communities in terms of the so-called high-performing districts. However, in my opinion, lifting the cap will drive the creation of more charter schools. Charter schools, most of the charter schools in the state of Massachusetts are not charters that have been formed by independent community members looking for a different alternative, but are being run by large corporations that run these institutions across the state, across the country and internationally. And over time, my belief is that every community in the state will be impacted if the cap is lifted. So, my perspective.
So my comment was, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this because I think it's a political question. Because there's two sides. I would argue that with all the points that Jennifer made, there are counterpoints to those all the way down the line. So I think about, as chair, I wanted to try to streamline our meetings to where we could have time to talk about the things that we had purview over that affected us directly, and not spend a lot of time on larger, bigger picture items. In terms of our priorities, reading our policies, the first priority, budget, goals and objectives, and performance standards, and how you could make an argument this affects the budget. I think we've got 78 or 80 charter schools now. You could have up to 120 because there's capacity there. I can't see how it's going to affect our budget in the near term, and I would argue financially that there are far more acute issues affecting our budget than charter schools. So this has been an interesting process of looking at how we set agendas and what issues we actually do deal with. So I know Jennifer wanted to potentially have a vote or have the committee make a vote. What I thought would be more expedient is to have a straw poll of who would like to vote on the issue. Is that okay? So,
Whether or not we want to vote
Right.
as a school committee.
so I would say, just show of hands for those who would like for the committee to vote on this issue. Raise it high. We got two out of 3. So we won't make a motion. Right? Moving on, item 6.
Item 6 is the 2016 MCAS report. This is an annual report for the school committee, and Dr. Brown will take you through a presentation.
I just say Jackie Daly is going to launch an overview of MCAS, starting with English Language Arts, and I'll pipe in to talk about math and science, and we'll answer any questions you have.
Are we good to go? There is a handout coming. It's a little cloudy, but I think you can read it. It's just a copy of what's up there, so you can look more closely. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. This is great. This is actually perfect timing and alignment with some of the work I've already been doing at the school as part of this role. In that, working with curriculum leaders, so leaders on the faculty who represent math, ELA, science, and social studies, we're starting to look at what are we currently doing, where are our growth opportunities, and obviously some data is a great place to start that work. So with the release of the MCAS results, it seemed like a nice launching point for my conversations with them. And right now, we've pretty much scratched the surface of the MCAS. There's a lot more work to be done, so hopefully we can answer enough questions that are out there today, but certainly there'll be a lot more work that happens in each of the content areas. So, starting with the grade 3 English Language Arts, I am sure already people are aware that this is a place where we saw a drop in some scores. So we'll spend a little more time on this particular portion of the ELA just to address that and think about that drop that was noted. So what we've done is pulled the scores that are put out by the Department of Education. So you see the chart on the right is something that's generated by them. I cannot take credit for that. What it does on the left-hand side is just take the achievement levels for this year, so you can see what they are. And you can see right away that our needs improvement is much higher than we would like it to be, and advanced has seen a drop. So as we head through this, what we thought we would do is just take a little look at the proficient and advanced, because those are the categories we would like to see the students in, obviously. So as we look down, we can see that from 2013, 14, and 15, we would consider that relatively consistent. 87, 87, 92. There's not a huge leap there. But where we saw the drop to 73, that obviously is of some concern and needs a little bit more investigation. So we did start that work. And these, again, this is not a list that won't get longer as time goes on, but just some immediate things that came to fruition were, in the warning category, we didn't have any students, but that 28% does represent 19 students. So that's a large number for us. There's some areas because of the park that we don't have a lot of state comparison data. So what we did was we looked at what was available to us, and that's what I'm sharing with you. So looking at the short response, we had 74% of our students scoring the total number of points. So these are like overarching, not just needs improvement, but all of the students. And in the open response, 50% of the students scored the total points possible. So those right there are areas for us that we need to look further into as well. And you'll see as we go through, that we've started to think about how are we going to address those, how we're going to think about those, what are we going to do in terms of looking at what we do in the classrooms, not just at grade 3, obviously, but leading up to grade 3. This isn't all about the grade 3 classrooms and what they're doing. This is about what are we doing from K to 3 to get them to that point. It was interesting to me, I did a fairly extensive item analysis in looking at our students that fell in that needs improvement category, and I noted that in question 2 and question 14, almost all the needs improvement students responded with the same inaccurate response, which was curious. It popped up like, wow, only a couple of kids actually got the right answer. So I went in to do a little more digging there. What I found out was, so 16% got the correct answer, and 6 students were at the 238 point, where the 240 would have put them at proficient. Had they got that one answer correct, it would have bumped them 6 students, which is almost a third, into that next category. So that would have put them at proficient, which was kind of interesting to me. Overall, the question 14, only 52% of students overall got the correct answer. So I wanted to know what that question was. And just to put that in there for you so you could see the type of error that was caused here, I just thought this was very interesting and ran into Barb with like I know exactly what they did. So,
And if I may interject,
yeah.
not an excuse for having a record high number of children in needs improvement, but this was super curious.
Yeah, it was just interesting to think that this could have flipped the table for 6 students, a third of the students.
What would that have done to the, since it's 73%, what would that, for those 6 students, what would that have done to them?
Because there were 69 in third grade, 73 students. So we're about 9%.
So 6 more students, that would have bumped us up.
About 9%.
About 9%. Thank you. Yeah, which would have been significant. So it was interesting that there was an article, and this is just the end page of the article that it was referring to, obviously a nonfiction, and on the heels of that article, you'll see there's a poem, My Father's Feet. The question 14, that multiple choice, you can see what the options were. It was based on the article, which what was the last thing that happens. The incorrect answer that almost everyone picked was C. The male penguin protects the egg with its feet. If you look at the picture and then look at the title of the poem, you see father's feet, you see him at the foot of the feet. I think kids were not identifying the end of the article carefully. They were jumping to cueing from the pictures. Interestingly, a lot of these students in the needs improvement were those students that might have had reading support in prior years, where you lean on pictures. So it was just interesting that that ended up being just a sample of one of the errors that was made. And again, to Rob's point, this isn't that this is an explanation for the low score, but it's the kind of work we can do in terms of digging deeper.
Is that sort of intended to be some misdirection or a trick question? Is that how the test is done?
I don't have that answer. However,
Your suspicion is?
the people that I've shared this with in terms of, well, check this out, I think I have something here, that has been a response that people have gone to is, well, was it like a trick to see if they were really attending to the question? Did they just jump right in? It's near the end, Who knows? I don't have that answer. Again, just a way of analyzing the data that we can do a lot more of that work and see what the shortfalls were.
From a content perspective, that final bullet, it's clear that our students score well in the conventions, the language arts standards, conventions and vocabulary. We certainly have work to do in writing and Jackie, in her item analysis, noticed that key ideas and details were the largest relative weakness for our third graders to identify.
Yeah, but you have been working, you've been working on reading and writing, and that's been, so has it been more of a focus? Do you think that's it? It's been more focusing more on the language conventions and less potentially on the key ideas and details?
I think this is a blip. I think our scores in English language arts even out in 4th and 5th grade, which, so I think this is more, the analysis will be more for this cohort of students versus our overall instruction, is my Cliff Note summation.
And certainly that type of work, the reading standards that you get into there, you're starting to get into much more of the analytical skills. When you look at a reading progression for students and the text complexity that those students are required to be able to navigate. So to be able to go between a nonfiction text and poetry, and that in it is a skill in and itself, in reading. So all of those little nuances are going to be important for us as we move forward. And certainly, again, that one question was just an interesting highlight, if you will, that just jumped out. So we can definitely look further into that.
Is a factor in all of this the fact that that particular class, having a child in that class, had significant growth from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year? I mean, we added like 9 heads to that class last year. So, and those teachers, I know.
That was prior to my arrival, so I would look forward to
We certainly have no way to scientifically prove that, but it is certainly a qualitative piece that we've talked about. Again, not an excuse, but a factor.
But you would know the individual scores though, right? You would know the individual, you would know who scored what specific score, correct? Okay, so you
can go back and look at
You
that.
could drill down to.
They can, but even if they knew, they couldn't tell us.
Right, but at least you would have some comfort that it's always been my concern is they take the test in March, and we don't know about it till now. So what happens to the kids that need improvement? You don't know they need improvement until way down the road,
I mean, I would
So how
argue
do
that we
you
have a
go
lot.
back?
Yeah.
It seems like they're 6 months further behind.
I think this is one summative set of data that we have. We have so much formative data and our own summative data along the way that I wouldn't, personally, I would have less concern that we don't see this data in that window because we have ongoing assessment. We are constantly assessing students, whether it's in sort of that, assessment situation, come sit next to me and let's see how you're doing. And, just that ongoing, I'm checking in, we're working in small groups, I've got a finger on the pulse all the time. So hopefully, we're working with teachers constantly to address those needs in an ongoing way, and we're not sitting waiting for this final piece of data. Again, in particular, in a situation like this, where there's this sort of anomaly that we're grappling with, like, what did happen here? So we wouldn't want to be sitting waiting for that. It's an ongoing activity.
And a distinction is we're assessing children in certainly all of the criteria that's measured in our state assessment. What we're not doing is assessing children particularly in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, but particularly in 3rd grade, we're not assessing them in a way that's going to measure the stamina that's required on this test. Again, not an excuse. We have a record, a high number of needs improvement students that's been unprecedented. But your comment about larger class sizes and the in a larger number of new students that moved in during the school year are certainly pieces for us to dig with.
Almost all the students in the grade take the test, right? It's not, even students on varying levels of IEPs. So
all students are expected to take the test unless their disability is so pronounced that we use a different, a portfolio-based assessment. I will mention that last year is the first year we had students refuse, which is a family right or a student right. So, so we have a couple zeros factored into this cohort. Because
So every different class has different makeup of kids and different needs and can look, this kind of thing can look different year to year.
And you'll see as members of the school committee that have been through state assessment presentations over the years, as we follow this cohort of students, albeit we won't have the same kind of data next year because of the MCAS New Generation Assessment. But we'll be able to follow this cohort over time as we did with a particular fourth grade cohort of students a couple of years ago in math, to assure that those students made gains collectively in that area. That was a notable relative weakness for that particular cohort on one assessment.
And we did see that just in a couple of things that we were looking at, that, you know, a group that are now in 5th grade, we sort of went back and looked at 3rd grade for them, and where there was maybe slightly lower, slightly higher, it was a pattern that was consistent over the last couple of years. So it certainly does go with the cohort. Not that you want to, again, put it all on, oh, well, it's just the cohort, but it's certainly a factor.
And the test is different every year.
So when we move to 4th grade English Language Arts, and you can speak to this, but the next slide shows, despite different cohorts and despite different assessment questions, we've been stable for 4 years at that particular grade level.
Yeah, so again, this is a similar structure. We pulled out just this year's numbers so that you can really see them from the graphic. And when you turn the page, if you will, or turn to the next slide, even though, again, you've got those slight shifts across proficient, advanced, and needs improvement, you know, give or take a couple of percentage points on either side, when you look at the consistency from 2013 to 2016, it's relatively stable. So that's good news for grade 4 there. And similarly in grade 5, we have, again, that same kind of slide, pulled out the 2016, and then you can see, you know, from 89%, 92%, 92%, and 87%, so with a slight drop there. So what we did was just an overarching, let's just think about ELA overall, and what we noted here was the past 4 years have yielded fairly consistent results for grades 3 to 5, with the exception of this cohort this year. The short answer and open response scores continue, though, to be an area of relative weakness compared to multiple choice type questions. So that wasn't necessarily new this year, and that's, I think, a pretty standard kind of area of weakness as we move again to this more analytical type work that students are being required to do when they're responding to text. So that hopefully captures the ELA scores for you. We'll certainly welcome any questions when we get to the end if you'd like to go back to that. But this then takes us into mathematics, same format as we had for ELA. You can see our math scores again. Grade 3, 63% in advanced is obviously really a healthy score. And then when you go through and look at the past 4 years, it couldn't be much more consistent than 87, 89, 87, 89. So that looked great. Moving on to grade 4, this was one of the areas where we saw the most improvement in math. In terms of number of students that were advanced and proficient, and we like to think we have a little bit of an explanation for that later on in terms of some instructional practices that have shifted at grade 4 that we're looking to grow as we move forward.
And a reminder back in 2014 that we had a notably lower scoring cohort in math.
That was the group that you referred to.
Whether it was our reflection in subsequent shifts we made to practices and sequencing of, in that year it was particularly around fractions, or whether it was a measure of a cohort, and of course the test is not consistent from year to year, the test questions change, but an example of when we had a super notable blip.
So that you were just talking about the reasons why that might have been. Did anything change? I mean, did you see that? Not specifically, but how did you respond? Did you do anything that brought it up to 77? I know it's the third graders in 2015, that came up. I mean, did you?
In that particular low scoring year relative to our expected and desired performance, you'll recall we had conversations, in particular fractions were an area where our kids did not perform holistically well in that particular math strand. And the fourth grade teachers worked with our math specialist and resequenced some of the units and how we, when we covered material throughout the year, all of our concepts spiral, but fractions happen to be, the unit of fractions happened not to be introduced until MCAS time and after, so we resequenced. This probably is wishful thinking, but our fourth grade team tries hard for us not to test on them. I can't remember if it was a Monday morning or a Friday, but they were like, Barb, can we avoid, I think it was a day after a 3-day weekend, and they thought the kids, anyway, that might be hocus pocus, but the last couple of years, we've tried to stay in that sweet spot of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday assessment, with the practice test being, with the review being the day before. In fifth grade, sorry to break your train of thought, but fifth grade, our math scores were 84% proficient in advanced,
And in 2000.
So in grade 5, that 2014 group that was in the 60s.
Is now the low group in this,
So it kind of makes you wonder how it tracks and what happens when they get to the middle school.
Right. This is, one of those patterns where you follow a cohort and there it is. You can see some evidence, if you will, of, they were lower scoring in the year before, and now they're now here in the next grade being lower performing. An increase in their performance from fourth grade to fifth grade.
Well, can you go back to the previous
They were
slide?
64
So that's 64% grade in 2014?
and now 77, right?
No, the same cohort.
Yeah.
They were fourth grade in 14, they're fifth grade in 15, sixth grade in 16. So if you look at the grade 6 scores
Yeah. So how
for
is that?
2016,
Yeah.
that cohort scored 83% in advanced and proficient.
So they're going
and we
up
could,
Yes.
over time, right? They
Yes.
did here from 14
it's not
to 15.
the same cohort of children because of course the Chickering
Yeah, part of them
fourth and
is
fifth
over,
graders,
but
but
Yeah.
half
I mean,
moved over.
we could aggregate if we were.
You could.
Yeah.
But-
So interesting though that, and they're improving is the bottom line of that, even though they might be slightly lower than the other years.
Yeah, I think the important data point over time is looking at a cohort and how has that cohort progressed over time. So this third grade cohort in ELA, it will be important to follow their progress as they move through.
I think that's important. I think the other point that's really important though is also seeing if there are trends, like you noted in the ELA. I'm not going to go back to ELA, but how you noted that the short answers and the open response were an area of weakness. I think that's really helpful data over time because then we can create potential programmatic.
I agree totally, especially when it's been noted that, that's been a weak area, not just this year, but in previous years. And short answer, open response type questions, students are going to continue to see more and more of those, certainly with next generation MCAS, and certainly as they go through and get to the competency test in grade 10. So that would be, it would be advisable that we really focus on short answer, open response, strategies, There's all kinds of things we can do to look specifically at that particular aspect of the assessment program.
So overall in math, we did the same thing that we did with the ELA, just like what were the big things we could glean. The celebration, if you will, was that all grades increased in the advanced category for mathematics, which is great, and was referenced before, but grade 4 saw the largest increase in that category as well, which they were certainly celebrating. Grade 5 is the only grade doing the science, technology, and engineering. And we saw an increase in the number of students with proficient and advanced there as well. 48% of the students in advanced and 36 proficient. And over time, increased, we've had a little blip there to 79, but then right back up to 84. And knowing that we're doing a lot of work around science, I'm sure that we'll continue to see improvement. So some trends that we noted there were just an increase in the advanced category from last year, just up 6%, and then a decrease, obviously, in its improvement. Nice balance, some shifted into our proficient level there. So part of the next part of our work, my charge in particular, is to look at what are we going to do with this data that we have in front of us now. Again, it's not exclusively this data set that we work with. There are many other factors that we're taking into account, but it certainly is a blessing in the grades 3, 4, and 5 that somebody has done a lot of work around this data for us, has analyzed the standards that we potentially could do some more work in. Again, we can focus on that open response, short answer. We can certainly target that analytical, that text-based response. There's a lot of work we can do there. So we just tried to note where have we been, the last few years, and where are we going? So hopefully we've captured some of that here.
And please forgive my typo, we are in year 4 of working with our Teachers for Teachers consultants.
So we are in year 4 of the literacy coaching, and this is really working on practices and focusing on Readers and Writers Workshop, differentiating instruction, working in small groups. That work this year is really rich in that it's targeted around some book studies and some groups vertically aligned, which is really nice. So people have been working within their grade level teams up until this point, is my understanding, and then this year they have the opportunity to start talking across grade level, like what are you doing in 2nd grade that I could potentially do in my 5th grade classroom, what would it look like in my 5th grade classroom? So there's some really nice conversation happening there. We're looking to calibrate instructional practice. Again, we're doing that through this type of PD, and then looking at the published curriculum maps. And that is a target for me this year, is to really go back, look at what they've done in the past 4 years. They've been putting these maps together, but like anything, over the 4 years, you don't revisit all the time. You get to the end and you've got the maps all in place. So now our job is going to be to go back, revisit those maps, potentially realign, let's look at what we're doing, and really let's take a look vertically at what's happening in literacy. Assessment practices, the Fountas-Pinnell benchmark assessments, and writing assessments in informational narrative and opinion writing. There are the on-demand writing prompts that are used, and again, this goes back to there are ongoing formative assessments in every grade level. So again, some are more formalized, and we ask for data points at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and end of the year, so that we can, again, look at student growth, or again, areas where we need to do some more work. And then, I cannot speak directly to this, but we've increased instructional time allotted to reading and writing, and I'm not sure what it was before, but I know Barb can speak to that.
And we've shared with you, I think as recently as last year, it might have been the year before, the instructional non-negotiables, where we're making sure, in this case, that teachers have an hour a day of readers workshop and ditto for writers workshop. The exception being kindergarten and first grade where, 45 minutes is probably more developmentally appropriate at that grade level. And our consistent approach to word study in K through 2 has been impactful the last couple of years with the teachers' adoption of the Foundations program and consistent training for our K through 2 educators.
So again, going back to what I see as my charge in this is really looking at what are the areas of growth for us and not putting too much on our plates, but being really aware of what are we currently doing, what are our goals right now, and what makes sense. We're looking at English language arts. We're looking at this vertical alignment of our curriculum and really looking at the units of study and how those align both in reading and writing. And what's great about that is having these curriculum leaders. I can work directly with them and then we can share out that information with a grade level representative and then we can share it faculty-wide. So it hopefully will be a really nice approach to that. The progress monitoring of the cohorts with the use of all our internal assessments is going to become, I think, more important, in particular with this grade 3 cohort. We really want to start looking closely at how they're doing, not just them, but clearly we're going to highlight what's happening for them. In math, and I know I alluded to this, and the increasing scores in certain areas, I'm working really closely with Robin Mansfield with this math workshop model. This is a really powerful model, I think, and from what she has seen and the work and energy she's putting behind this, I think this is a really important area of growth for us. Obviously, we have our curriculum, which is the everyday math curriculum, but what's really nice about this is in a workshop model, it allows teachers and any support teachers that might happen to be in that room to really focus on small group instruction, explicit instruction, and then targeted kind of practice stations. So you're really differentiating in what I consider to be one of the most powerful ways. And the workshop model is something that students are used to because there's a reading workshop model and a writing workshop model. So anytime we can see and have the luxury of working with students in small groups and set students up to practice skills and strategies together in small groups as part of an independent station, I think it's great. And we're seeing results from it. So I think now our work is, and our charge, Robin and I have already started this discussion, how do we share this out so that people feel really comfortable with it? And how do we share the data that we have so far? And how do we support stuff with professional development, whatever it is they need in order to make this successful, because I think it's a powerful practice.
So for the past 3 summers, through our professional development budget, we have paid Robin to train small groups of teachers that have been interested in growing a more differentiated model for math instruction. Something else we did this past summer, obviously our curriculum is the standards. The program we use, Everyday Math program, is what I call the backbone of how we teach math. Certainly we've identified lots of places where we supplement where the Everyday Math program may or may not be in the zone of what our kids need. The Everyday Math vendors have come out with an updated version of the Everyday Math program. So we had a grade level rep per grade with Robin Mansfield, and some of our friends from Chickering met with the vendor over the summer. We were able to update our materials in kindergarten, so they're using what they feel is an improved Everyday Math program. I don't know if it's going to be realistic, but we certainly will try to roll that up through the grades as we get into budget process. But the teachers have found the revised version to be a little more comprehensive, to have more online materials to support families. So we'll keep you updated on that.
And lastly, in the science, the long-awaited science, technology, and engineering standards were released in January after, I don't know how many draft versions went out with NGSS and us putting our own spin on it in Massachusetts. But we're finally there, and we have a document that we're working from. And I don't know, at my presentation, some people in this room were there when we did our first launch of the PD with Chickering. It was, I think, a very powerful day, having teachers from both schools in a room working at their grade levels, so grade 3 teachers from both schools, together, grade 4 together, working and talking about how we're going to plan our science, technology, and engineering units over the course of the next 3 years with a real strong inquiry base, lots of PD, front-loading it with guest speakers. I think it's going to be really powerful and unique, because my understanding is that we haven't done a lot of work where we've brought the two schools together to really align the curriculum.
To write curriculum.
So, yeah. So this I think was great. I know I was incredibly energized and excited on that day. And we look forward to a couple of PDs actually in November, and then really kicking off the actual writing of curriculum starting in the new year. So that's...
And we see this as a 2-year process,
yeah,
perhaps longer.
Yeah.
So the last slide is food for thought. I would feel remiss if I didn't make mention that I think it's important for us to consider ways to expand literacy intervention supports for our students that are struggling readers. We don't have a reading specialist. We use an educational assistant position in what I consider an effective model to provide intervention for our K through 2 students who need targeted intervention that might look like a double dose of reading comprehension, word work, vocabulary development, fluency, whatever aspect of reading is that they're struggling in. There are no staff members above and beyond great classroom teachers to provide any intervention for students at grades 3 through 5. And we rely on classroom teachers to be able to provide extra support for students that are reading below grade level or struggling to meet our benchmarks. And I think it's important to put that out there as a placeholder when we talk about comprehensive ways to support our learners. About a third of our students who scored needs improvement were students that ended the prior year receiving reading intervention.
It would have for 2 years.
It would have, I put that up there. Overall, the goal is to use this any assessment information to inform our practice and to monitor effective growth of students individually, and we will do that, and we will do that well.
And to keep me busy.
Can I ask 2 quick questions? One is, so Barbara, are you saying that since budget season is coming around, are you saying that you would like to have a reading specialist? Is that a pie in the sky, or are there other options of things that you do?
Can you say that for the budget discussion?
Yeah, we could do it now, we could do it then.
We've got some more to cover. I mean, how are we on time?
We're good.
Do you want to discuss that now, or?
Well, did you have other questions? And you had
I
some
did.
other questions on this.
I don't anymore.
Okay, no, that's okay. That's,
Greg
keep
scared
going.
it out of me.
Regarding, I mean, we're going to have, next meeting is going to be mostly about budget, right? And then,
That's fine.
you sure?
Oh, you know, yeah.
Okay. You have other questions?
I forgot.
It could be an ask, let's just see.
Right? Just one goes down the pike. Thank you. That was really excellent.
That was very good.
The questions I had looking over the material were exactly the ones that you made an effort, you noticed and made an effort to answer as well. So I appreciate you anticipating a lot of the questions and effectively providing some background to those answers.
Actually, I thought of my question. Just really quickly, you keep referring to assessment and more assessment, and I sort of want to put it out there. It's not like the students are being given formalized assessments constantly. There's lots of
Formative. So formative assessment is really that ongoing, it could look like an observation. It could be, you sit down next to a student, read to me. I'm just going to listen to you, talk to me about. That also could constitute an assessment. There are those assessments that we benchmark for certain points in the year, again, sort of that beginning, middle, and end of the year. But I know for me, when I'm referring to assessment, beyond obviously MCAS type data, it's that ongoing finger on the pulse. I know my students, and I can speak to my students' skill set at any time.
I think the piece that feels really inauthentic for teachers around MCAS, and we certainly understand its form and its function. But what feels really inauthentic for teachers is, when you're working with students to assess their learning, their progress, their, what they're sort of good at versus what they have mastery of, that advanced concept and application of. When kids get stuck and teachers probe and question kids, talk to me about your thinking, show me what you did so far. What would you do next? And they debunk or they better understand a kid's math behavior or reading behavior or writing behavior based on where it's breaking down for kids. And I think teachers have, feel so tied with that gag order that you're not allowed to do that at MCAS. And so I mention that just because most of our teacher observation and more authentic kinds of assessment are what I believe are informing teachers day to day, week to week, month to month, and they're planning for their individual and collective students.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie and Barbara, thank you, that was well done. Very good job, thank you.
And if you have the magic touch again, we have a little something to supplement the technology conversation. Whatever you pushed before, bring it up.
Going right into,
Yes, sir.
another presentation apparently.
Item 7. How about popcorn and drinks?
The next item is the presentation of the FY18 Technology Supplement Plan draft. That document was provided for you in your packet, and I will ask Dr. Ledoux to introduce that to you.
Yes, so you recall that the district plan, Future Ready Learning, was voted in the June meeting. So this is Pine Hill's take on the technology plan and its goals. It was led by Dr. Brown. Jackie Daly was part of the conversation. And we bring together a building-based team, which I think is important. Mr. Ataka, the Director of Technology, and myself sit on that, along with Lori Ryan, Nicole Dara, Melissa Feldman, Teresa Vienna, me, so that they became those people who took a great eye on the goals and objectives as noted here and thought about what is it that should be the next step for technology at Pine Hill. Again, it's under the 5 areas of learning, teaching, leadership, assessment, and infrastructure, and you can see the goals as aligned for Pine Hill in here. We felt it was an important part of the tech plan supplement to give you a glimmer of what it looks like for learning for students and how the technology is infused, and that will assist this plan to come alive. Also, the documents give you the budget as you're going forward, as you're thinking about budget appropriations, and also gives you a look back on the plan from this current school year and what's been accomplished. So that's sort of laying the groundwork. But I think it's important for us to look at what does technology look like at the day in the life of, and I'll let Dr. Brown add anything else that I might have omitted from our conversation.
Just that this has been really exciting collaboration and work, and I'm going to pick on Lori Ryan, our librarian, and a super tech-savvy educator to come up and speak to some of the pictures that we collected, because you can articulate with greater detail than I can. But I just want to say about the tech supplement plan, we have been working hard the last 5 or 6 years through DSEF grants, through operational budget, to grow the devices and technologies in our school. And you'll notice in the tech supplement plan, while we know that technology applications and devices will change instantly over the next months and years, we're not asking per se for new technologies. We're of course asking for a replacement cycle to maintain the technologies we have. But I believe right now we're our technology team and our work with Anthony and Karen and others, we feel we have adequate devices through our mini pads, our iPads, and most excitedly for our older students, the Chromebooks, and to have access for technology through planned and purposeful learning activities, and through those in the moment kinds of we need to look something up, or we want to use technology spur of the moment to enhance a teaching or learning opportunity. So I mention that because I feel like that's a shift, because we've been so focused on acquiring technologies. Karen asked us to capture just some vivid examples for you of what technology might look like in any snippet as you walk around the building, as many of you have done in school committee tours in the past. And you captured some pictures, I captured some pictures.
You did, okay.
I did, and I will speak to those, but I knew she'd capture some higher level learning activities.
The ones that I put on the slideshow are photos that were taken mostly in the library during makerspace time, which is more of a collaborative time where Teresa Bienemy and I gather with students and teach them kind of higher level tech things like coding and some programming things, and then creative problem solving, collaboration, and things like that around technology. So this is, the first several slides are pictures of students using some of the devices that we've purchased through grants. This is a ProBot, which is a little programmable car for older students. And then the next slide is a Bebot, which is kind of the beginnings of programming. Students can put in simple codes and direct their little robot bee to do different tasks.
And these are kindergartners. Last year we started Makerspace right with our 5-year-olds.
Very exciting. The 3D printer, Teresa and I worked together to, it's obviously a focal point, but we worked together with 4th and 5th graders to teach them the design process, and they did some problem solving to design some printable solutions to a problem that they had, and we were able to print them on the 3D printer. And this is another type of robot. It's called the Kibo, and kindergartners use blocks and create code with the blocks and program the little robot to do different tasks. There's more pictures of the kindergartners using the Kibo robots. And we also have, devices that allow students to share what they've learned in creative ways. And this pair of students is sharing, using iMovie, they're creating an informational video on some of the things they learned in the library. So they're just kind of putting that together. And
I took this picture, but it was during library.
Oh, okay.
And I asked the kids for an explanation, and I got a very, very long and detailed one, which I'm not sure I'll do justice with right now. But what struck me is the kids were building something to solve a problem, but they were interacting with one another. It wasn't one kid, one iPad. They were building on each other's ideas through an interactive app, is my understanding from.
Yeah.
Here's another example of coding. Our young students, all the way up through 5th grade, coding is now part of the computer science curriculum. Another example of computer programming. This happened upon a 5th grade classroom, and they're talking about the different branches of government. And in the old days when we sat at our desks with our textbooks, and we had to do a lot of listening to verbiage, and it was just an example where teachers, as they all do for many of their lesson plans, had an interactive piece that provided a review for students to literally manipulate some of the key terminology and categorize it by branch of government. So again, it just makes it more. This is a typical site. This happens to be outside of a 5th grade classroom. In our 4th and 5th grade classrooms, we now have 1 Chromebook cart for every 2 classrooms. And the kids are loading them up and plugging them in. And if you were in Lori's, the library before school on any given morning, this morning I strolled in at, in the library around 8, and some of our kids get dropped off early by design, and they're in there downloading apps from the...
They do maintenance work on the iPads for it. They download apps, they update, they recommend apps, so we look at them together. It's kind of a fun interactive thing.
Students as leaders, and I noticed that our current 5th graders who have been doing this for a year are training next year's. They're training 4th graders. So Lori's never going to run out of support because we're always training a new cadre of kids. Here's an example where kids were working. This was in Miss Sidman's 2nd grade classroom, and this was a math practice activity. And if you click to the next picture, the teacher very strategically has apps that are categorized for different math concepts or coding practice. So the kids have a choice, but it's within a very defined, it's not a free-for-all, it's within a very defined skill set that the teacher is having kids practice certain concepts. Apparently I plugged that picture on twice. Oh, that's the end? Yeah, and that was just over 48 hours we captured technology, which is certainly not an exhaustive.
So to exemplify sort of the in-the-moment use of the technology, how the replacement cycle, which in the school budget, in the budget pages you'll see, looking at some desktop computers to replace some of the interactive projectors, and to complete the teacher desktop replacement with laptops so that they can have that in-the-moment use of the data teams, in-the-moment use of refining those curriculum maps and those types of things. So you can see how it's being spent. And then the addendum actually gives you an updated inventory of what is available for technology. And that's the very last page of your packet for the supplement. I think it's important that it's the sharing of the resources and sharing what's happening in the classrooms. And that's happening through the professional conversations that happen at Pine Hill, through some technology symposiums, and also grade level sharing. So there's a lot that's changed over the years since we've been doing these touchline supplements, and we're at a place now where it's really looking at the user and the students and how they incorporate the technology into their learning. So any questions you might have about the current supplement?
I've just got a question about Chromebooks. Just from what I've read, it seems like everything is going to Chromebooks, even schools that have one-to-one and they had laptops, they're going to Chromebooks. Is that the same here in terms of, do we need iPads and iPad minis and anything other than a Chromebook anymore?
We're having that conversation, and at this time, I always explain to the kids, a Chromebook is kind of like an iPad and a laptop had a baby together. You can do double the stuff on it. Sorry, public sharing. At the younger grade levels, we're still reliant on the iPad minis or Maxis, as I call them. I think they're more user-friendly for the younger kids, the shorter little fingers. We've had a philosophical conversation about when to introduce keyboarding. Well, our kids, our kids are hunting pepper, our kids are thumbs, through their recreational world. There's still a lot of rationale not to have our kids on a keyboard too young for developmental.
And I have to say that the iPad has apps on it that aren't necessarily available through the Chromebooks, which is why I think that's the right choice for that age level.
Okay.
So first of all, I loved the pictures. Thank you. I think it's great to see the visual of what's happening in the classroom. I think that's awesome, and thank you for putting this together. I feel like a little like a Debbie Downer, but this is a pet peeve of mine, and I apologize. But benchmarks are not action items, and I feel like some of the benchmarks, like share the application of digital tools in the classroom during monthly faculty meetings, does not feel to me like a benchmark, and I'd love to keep working towards having benchmarks be quantifiable things, because this is so important, and I'd like to see ways that we can really not just show that we're using it, but see that it's making significant differences, or making some differences. And so that will also then allow us to inform our next steps.
I have to say, with the building-based teams at Pine Hill, that's not something we've had before. I think that you're going to see clearer benchmarks as the plan progresses and in the upcoming year. I honestly believe that.
Great.
I've got a question about technology, going back to MCAS. Is there technology that's used to help the kids in the needs improvement area? You know what I mean? How that can be, they can use their time more efficiently, or use the teacher's time more efficiently to help them in their areas that they need improvement?
Huge conversation. My 2-cent soundbite is that there are fabulous programs, websites, and apps available to help kids practice and reinforce skills. My personal strong feeling is it doesn't take the place of direct instruction, but how we balance. There are infinite resources out there, and there are resources that our educators use if you, student Greg, needed support in a particular math strand, and your skill acquisition was a year below grade level. Teachers could go in and create practice learning materials that finite to the level that you're progressing at, and what math skill and or strand you needed reinforcement on. So there's great tools.
So it's more appropriate for math than...
Well, not necessarily.
But you saw the Sidney Sidman picture of the iPad that showed all the math apps, but there are electronic resources for reading and writing too.
And you'll see our kids going into, for example, Khan Academy, and watching tutorials to remember how to multiply exponential numbers, or, there's amazing materials out there.
Okay, thank you. All right. 7, item 8, the monthly financial report.
Okay, so you have the report in your packet, and the notice that the date we used was actually October 5th, and that was mainly because, and for the new members, all central office sits at the region, and this is the time of year that we spread all the costs down to the Dover financials and the Sherborn financials. So that purchase order wasn't put in until October 5th, and therefore that's why your report is October 5th. It's a big number to capture, so I'm going to make sure you have the most accurate salary information available. This is the first time, I think, for the new members to see when they saw the status of appropriations like this in June, but we added a column so that you could easily take what had been expended date, so what we expended through September 5th, everything that we've encumbered to get us through June 30th. We now have a total column. So you can see what the total projection is, and then obviously the last column is looking at the operating variance for our remaining budget. This month we focused on salaries because at this point, if we didn't have any personnel changes and we could finish the year, you can sort of see where you're going to be with salaries, except for a few things that do get expended during the year. So if you go to your $126,000 remaining balance positive variance right now, of that, I think we can accurately say about 40,000 of it is going to be positive salary variance that will be remaining there come June 30th. The rest of it will be getting spent. For instance, custodial services, there's the academic leadership, those are the stipends, those kind of things have not been paid out yet. But 40,000 is what of known variances that are made up of primarily about $15,000 from the central office, and you can read the individual variances in your report. 17,000 from the SPED administration sort of reorganization. And
Where's that number?
where's what number?
You said 17,000 from...
Oh, yeah, so if you look at the teacher's SPED line category, you have to look at the,
Okay, all right.
you have to look at the narrative.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand.
We are really refining where we're charging things right now, so it's going to take us a little time to get the budget to align with where the expenses are, so that's why the numbers look a little out of whack.
So the ed assistants were in the teachers,
Yes.
and you're pulling those out?
Yes.
So they were all, whatever...
Some of them got, so we, at the end of, before the budget rolled, we fixed some of the things. So the educational assistants that used to be in the teacher's classroom actually did get moved. So the educational assistants that sat in the SPED teacher's line item has not gotten moved yet.
So they were...
But we're charging everything to educational
So there were
assistants.
regular ed, general ed
Yes.
assistants in the SPED
No, in the teacher.
and the teachers? Okay.
So all the educational assistants sat in the teacher's salary.
Whether they were SPED?
In the function,
Okay.
exactly. So half of it got pulled out, half of it didn't. So that's what we're still working on, making your budget numbers look the way. But what we're doing is we're charging everything where we want it to be.
So that's why then some of the numbers.
Yes.
seem okay.
So if you look at the teacher's sped, that's why it looks like it's a positive variance of 240,000. That's because the budget for the educational assistants is sitting there, but we're charging educational assistants to the educational assistants line. So that's why I said we're better off at this point looking at the narrative and not necessarily at the numbers, because we're still making your statement.
And forgive me, SPED assistants would be where?
They're on educational assistants.
So educational or SPED and...
Yes. So now educational assistants are everything, but we know what is general ed and what's SPED.
Can we see that? I mean, are we going to be seeing that
Yeah.
broken out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we usually, maybe we can break it out.
No, once we have completed the restructuring of some of the function codes to better, to improve the reporting by expenditure as the DESI function codes were originally intended to do. We will then print a new complete line item budget for you. So you'll see all of the lines. Remember that this report takes what may be 4 or 5 or 6 different lines of salaries and condenses into one
To a function.
to a function.
So we've got all the teacher, speech, OT,
Yeah.
all that stuff here. So it's,
Yes.
we've seen it
Yep.
before, it's just different in this one.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
This is a...
In fact, in your budget book there, another big sort of change we made was your specialists, like music, art, gym,
Right.
were being charged in the SPED specialists. So we
In
moved
this,
those in your blue book, but now we're putting in classroom teachers, because that's really where it should go.
So when we would look at in-district SPED, we would...
Yeah, right.
No, so what was happening is, at the end of the year, for the end of the year report, there were a number of bridge documents that had to be prepared to segregate them out of the budget format.
So we see the specialist in this.
But now
Art,
you're not
music,
going to see,
PE.
you're not going to see it next year's budget, and we've already made actuals, because we put it in the right place.
They're sitting in a different place.
Teacher's classroom is where it goes, yeah.
Okay.
But so then we won't be able to necessarily compare last year's or this year's budget to next year's budget
Yeah,
line by line. It'll be-
Exactly.
Well,
Okay.
but, so they're using classroom teachers, so the music teacher is in the classroom teacher?
We're putting things in different.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you go back and just reclassify your budget into the right buckets?
Well, the
That-
budget will be, 17's budget will be
Wouldn't we want to
reclassified.
see the music teacher?
But we're not going to go back and do the
separate
actuals
from
from previous years.
Right.
Yeah.
You won't be able to compare actuals, but your FY17 budget
will
is going to be different from what we're looking here at line items.
Exactly.
When
And
you
that's
do
what
your
we're doing right
planning
now.
forward.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Why don't we fix it now, though? Is it too
We are,
hard?
Yeah,
it's time, it's a matter of time.
It's
Okay.
it is, and then you see it.
You're saying that this was actually,
It seems like you'd want to, see at some level, like in the budget, the budget document, you'd want to see music, art, those.
You will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
I thought-
it's going to be a different function code. It's going to be in teacher's classroom versus teacher specialists. Specialists that really should be sped teachers.
oh, okay. So we just saw specialists and
Yeah.
made sense because they're specialists, they're easy teachers.
Right, but that's not really the
right-
class, that's not what that function code is meant.
Okay.
And there's a larger purpose here as well. We're trying to make the function codes consistent across all three budgets,
That would be helpful.
which they are not. So this is all a part of that comprehensive process.
So your job's going to get easier.
Horrible bookkeeping. Every year.
It's all the same. What have we spent? $3,689 on the school committee? I'm just kind of curious, what do we spend money on?
Part of that is where you're looking at the,
Just under expenditures, top line.
it's the MASC
yeah.
dues, a
Oh,
big piece of it.
okay.
That's what probably most of it.
Any questions on this, anybody? Oh, yeah, maybe I have a question.
Of course.
Yeah, so, what's that mean?
Well, I have a question too.
School building leadership, the assistant principal being fully charged to general fund versus 70% of the budget. I remember when that changed, it says the literacy educational assistant is now being charged to REAP grant. What is a literacy educational assistant relative to a reading specialist? I'm sure they're not the same. So what's a literacy educational assistant?
A literacy educational assistant is a paraprofessional level hire. She happens to have a teaching certificate. She provides intervention to students who are reading below grade level, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. To date, she's been reflected as one of our ed assistants, so it's kind of deceiving because we're using her differently. A reading specialist would be a certified reading specialist who would have a deep understanding of language and literacy acquisition, who would provide assessment for students to help us really break down where struggling learners are struggling, who would help to provide very specific services to students and to coach teachers in those strategies that students need in order to make effective progress.
Okay, that makes sense. So what does this mean? Did we add somebody or did we?
No.
No, it's the funding source.
So we've adjusted the funding source. So previously, the assistant principal was being funded 70%
Right.
through the budget, 30% through the rural education grant, the REAP grant. And the paraprofessional was being charged to the educational assistant line. The REAP grant is a much more appropriate funding source for work being done in literacy. And so what we're doing is we're charging that educational assistant position to the REAP grant. It's about $33,000. And fully funding in the budget the assistant principal's position. So in effect, that freed up about half of an EA position that now is in the budget. It gives us more flexibility in the long run.
Okay.
Now, we do have some carryover money from the REAP grant, so we're looking at what those opportunities are to perhaps for this year, and you'll see why we're looking at this when we talk about enrollment, and specifically out of district enrollment and expenses. But we feel that it's good practice to charge the REAP grant, the paraprofessional who's doing that literacy work, to that grant.
Okay.
So that's the adjustment that we made.
So that's why you see that school leadership building is over budget. That's
Right.
because we're charging all of
Right.
that.
So that EA is counted in the, not number 9?
Yes,
General ed assistants.
Okay.
it was. And then moving forward, though, you know, we'll separate that out, and we'll identify it as an FTE relative to the work she's doing. Because she's doing, the work she's doing is different than what the other EAs are.
And this may be, I noticed there was a mention of it, and then it's also commented on it in the expenditures, the boilers. And this may be something that we can discuss more, or maybe more appropriately considered in our committee meeting scheduled for next week. The boiler, was it a missed PM? Was the boiler past its life expectancy, just an unexpected failure?
No, so it's actually not the boilers, it's...
Sorry.
It's boiler, it's connected to the boilers, but it's the 2 overflow tanks.
Yeah, expansion tanks, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, thank you
Yeah.
for clarifying. So just, so we're trying to plan for,
I'm sorry.
just from was this a preventative maintenance item that was overlooked or missed, or?
No, it's the way I understand it, it's a visibly go, see the ring. It has a rubber bladder inside.
Yeah,
And over time, it just went. And so we had to replace the whole tank. So it's not something that you would every 5 years just pull
yeah,
the,
right.
so
Well, but then if the rubber is known to fail, so 5 years, we gotta start.
We'll have to look in the on-site report, I'm not...
Yeah, that's all, I was like, well,
Yeah, we
a
should
failure,
look
we
at
wanna
that.
try to prevent.
So it was
Yeah.
old, like really old?
it wasn't, I don't know if it was really, really old, that I don't know. But both of them actually, there's 2 tanks there. One probably had already failed and the other one was overcompensating. And then when the second one failed, that's when the issue arose.
I think we just want to make sure we get it on our replacement plan if it's something that needs to be replaced.
Right. So both tanks were custom made
Perfect.
for the next.
This year we're not doing.
Wait, both the original ones or the ones that to be fit,
So
to be
the whole
placed in
thing,
service?
they both of the expansion tanks were removed and new ones were
New custom ones put in?
Yeah, because if you went in and just did because Rob did look at, what if we just go in and replace the bladder? The labor that would take to do that within the tank, I don't know if you see, I mean, the
Yeah.
tank, it's better, it's much cheaper, a third less cheaper
Yeah,
to re-customize and just build, put the new ones in.
All right.
And we had heat this morning, just in time.
All right. Item number 9, the October 1st annual enrollment report.
Thank you, Greg. There's 3 documents that was part of the packet, and then there was an additional document that I'd like to walk through related to out-of-district and in-district special education and enrollment. Let's go right to the first document, which is this one here. So the first document provides 10-year of enrollment history by grade. It gives you an opportunity to look back 10 years at what the enrollment was in this 07-08 school year and what's happened to enrollment since then. The more immediate issue, of course, is what's going to happen to enrollment, certainly in the near term, and what about looking out the next 5 years. So our October 1 enrollment for this year is 404. That represents a growth of 23 students over what the October 1st enrollment was at this time last year. However, it's important to note that certainly I will tell you in my almost 20 years now of experience as a superintendent, the change in enrollment from October 1 right up to June 1st at the Pine Hill School was, relatively speaking, on a percentage basis, we added, I think, 13 students between October 1st and June 1st. I've never seen a school grow by that much over the course of a school year. In my experience, that's unusual that you have that many students coming in. Now, whether that was, one of those circumstances where it happens, once in a long, long time, versus is that going to be a regular trend? We'll certainly understand more as this year goes by. However, what I would tell you is that as of June 1st, we were based on assuming that all of our students who are currently in each grade would move on to the next grade. We had already accounted for 64 students in kindergarten. We ended up with 61. And we had, there was a list that had been developed over the previous couple of months leading up to June 1st, where we had a number of families contacting the school, indicating that either they had already purchased a home in Sherborn and would be moving in over the summer and attending school next year, or were very close to or planning to do that. So we used those numbers, and as of June 1st, we were projecting 397 students to enroll. So what was interesting for this year is that number grew by 7 students over the course of the summer. Part of going back to some of the data from June of 2015 that had been collected at the school level. In June, when the committee and the administration were talking about what enrollment in September might look like, we're factoring in some of that data that had already been collected in June of 2015 that we used this past June. So I thought that was interesting, and I think that there were probably 10 or 12 names on that list a year ago, June, that ended up enrolling in September, and so that was part of that larger than anticipated enrollment increase as of October 1st. So what we have not experienced in terms of reviewing enrollment data is, we didn't see that large influx. At least on paper, we were already expecting them that we did last year to enroll over the summer. As a matter of fact, it was really, other than those kids officially coming off that list to get to the 397, there were, I had the number, I don't have it in front of me, I think there were 11 other families that came on board. And there were, I think, 4 families, well, a total of 4 students that did migrate out over the course of the summer. So that's how we ended up at the 404. But at this time last year, we were projecting that enrollment was going to actually go down by 2 students. So we were projecting 379 students. We had that additional 13 students come in over the course of the year. That got us up to the 383 or so, and then the list that I just talked about got us to the 397. So I just wanted to kind of take you through how we actually realized those 404 students, because that is a large number over the course of the year, 23 students, which is about a 6% increase in enrollment. Actually a little more than that, maybe a 7% from year to year. Is a large increase, but we had already captured a lot of those students through the year. We've seen inquiries have been slow, right? Do we have?
For potential new families?
Yes.
I'm aware of one family that anticipates moving in before the holidays with 2 children.
Yeah.
That's all I'm aware of.
So the way that the projection methodology works here, and we're using I'm using what's called the 3-year cohort survival methodology. It's very simple. A cohort for our projection purposes that we're looking at is the kindergarten cohort, the first grade, second grade, third grade, and fourth grade cohorts for 2016-17. We look at the, and on a percentage basis, what the enrollment number has been for the last 3 years, going from kindergarten to grade 1 as an example. So this methodology takes that 3-year average. So if the number of first graders moving from, if the kindergarten enrollment to first grade enrollment differential in the 14-15 year was 8%, and the next year it was 20%. I'm just throwing these numbers out. In the third year it was 22%. We add up 20, 22, and 8. 50%, divide that by 3, you get an approximate cohort survival rate of 17% or 117%. So we project, in this case, the 3-year rate from K to 1 is 116. So we would be projecting that 10 more students would enroll as first graders than the current kindergarten number. So it's a straight mathematical formula, and it's embedded in this worksheet. So we can, using that methodology, we project what grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 numbers might be next year. Part of that methodology, because it's based on using the October 1 figures every year, what that means is that the number projected to go from kindergarten to grade 1st includes the net amount of all students who may move into Sherborn and become first graders, as well as students who are currently kindergarten students who over the course of the year from October 1 through September 30th of next year move out of town. So it's not that the same 61 kindergarten students will enroll as first graders next year, plus 10 new students who move into town. It'll be a combination of those coming in and a few students who will leave. And again, it's a straight mathematical formula. For the kindergarten projections, what had been done here in the past is the current year's number has just been carried over. I provided in the packet a worksheet called Historical Kindergarten Enrollment versus Kindergarten Eligible Census Data. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through that, but that's simply what we did last year in December after we received the 16-17 kindergarten age eligible census from the town clerk. We were back to over the 5 previous years. We looked at what that census number was. We compared it to the number of kindergarten students who actually enrolled on that September 1st or August 29th, whatever the first day of school was. And we calculated an enrollment ratio. And we just averaged that over 5 years to project, and this was done in December, to project what the kindergarten numbers might be. That projection last year, based on a kindergarten census number of 62, was 65 students. Up until June 1st, we had 64 students that had registered, and with the combination of, I think, a couple of new kindergartners coming in and some parents deciding to make different decisions over the summer about their kindergarten child, either holding them out or going to a different school, perhaps where they were for pre-K and just deciding to do another year there. Our number for using this method for predicting the number of K students was pretty accurate. We don't have next year's census data yet. We'll look to get that. We want to be consistent about when we get that data, so we'll look to get that data right at the end of November again this year, which was the time we received it last year. And then we'll just plug that into our 5-year formula and calculate a projected number. The K numbers that you see on this projection sheet, I didn't want to just carry over the 61 because that artificially inflated what in those years what the projected enrollment would be, and it wasn't in any way related to the survival cohort methodology. So as a placeholder for now, what I simply did was I took a 3-year average of the last 3 kindergarten classes and just plugged that number in, and then I did that moving forward. So, you know, I used 53 as a base, went back the last 3 years, and that's how I get the 54, 56, etc. For our purposes now, I just think it's a more reasonable estimate of what the real kindergarten numbers might be. So what this data suggests is that enrollment will continue to grow next year and will grow by approximately 15 students. And, you know, and it will grow by the rates that are, again, mathematically calculated. I've been using this methodology. It's not mine. I didn't invent it by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a methodology that many school demographers use when they do enrollment projections. I've been doing this again all of my years as a superintendent, and you know, I have found that in the end, if the projection is within 1 to 3%, you know, you're doing a pretty good job per grade level. So again, we don't have a magic ball, but I think this is what we can expect. One of the things we'll look at more carefully as we go into preparing next year's budget and starting those discussions is we'll take a look at these projection numbers, we'll compare them to class size guidelines, where we are this year, and take a look at sections. One of the things that I think worked out well for the committee in budgeting the 2 additional sections this year, you'll see that our class size numbers, frankly, virtually across the board are very favorable. And given the enrollment projections as we stand at this point in time anyway, adding those 2 sections does provide room for growth, frankly. So we'll continue to look at that very carefully. And then just because the enrollment has changed in the last couple of years, I wanted to look at what would the projections look like just by using the 1-year growth rate. Because in times of growth, the 1-year growth rate might be more accurate, more accurately reflect what the current trends are. So you'll see that the numbers don't change all that dramatically by using the 1-year rate. And I'll go back in a second. The second document is just a more drilled down detail per grade level, per section on how the enrollment is broken, how that 404 is broken out. This does not include, our enrollment projections, we don't include the pre-K numbers, so those are treated separately, but you will note that on this document, we do have 26 students attending our preschool program, which is actually up a few students from last year. So that's certainly good news. Do you want to take some questions now, and then I'll go into the special education piece?
I was just going to make a comment.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, we effectively have an extra teacher next year. If you've got the 5th grade dropping off of 4 sections, so you've got 3 sections of 4 and 3 grades of 4 sections and 3 grades of 3 sections, you have even more capacity because you're dropping a grade of 4 sections, right? I mean, so
where is that?
Well, the 5th grade, if the 5th grade rolls off, right, then you've got 1, 2, 3 sections, 3 grades of 3 sections, and 2 grades of 4 sections. You have that essentially that 5th grade teacher that's freed up. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not playing it right.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I'm not seeing it quite that way.
Right. But in other words, grade 2 goes to grade 3, where there's 4 sections. You'd have 63 kids in 4 sections without any changes in numbers, is what I'm saying. So you gain some capacity out of that. Never mind, it's late.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be reviewing that in detail if we get into the budget discussions.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so what are you going to do next?
Well, I just want to review the special education numbers. So this is a packet that I handed out at the table. So there's a cover memo. It's a cover memo that is regarding FY17 out-of-district tuition budget update. So this information serves 2 purposes. The first is to provide you with an understanding of the numbers of students from Sherborn K to 12 plus, or pre-K to 12 plus, that are out of district, and the number of students that are in district by grade level. The second purpose is to be very clear with you that there have been some changes since the budget was voted on out-of-district numbers that is presenting that is having a budget impact, a negative budget impact. So I want to walk you through that. So let's just go through the cover document, if you don't mind. Right now, the FY17 operating budget is $626,600 budgeted for out-of-district tuition expenses. We expect to receive, the state has told us that we'll receive $281,276 from circuit breaker reimbursement. That's based on the state funding 70%. My sense is that as we get to the end of the year and they finalize the 4th quarter payment, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe we'll see probably an additional 2 to 3% coming in. But that's $6,000 or $7,000. But we'll see. I think we'll see an additional amount coming in to get the reimbursement level to about 73%. And then the third line, so bear with me here. I'm calling it proposed tuition revolving fund. Capital letter again. That's the type of boy, it is a problem. It couldn't be me. Anyway, so the $50,876, that is what we have determined through your action from the last committee based on tuition and then a portion of one student's cost of an EA. That we'll receive from the town of Dover $50,876. Dawn has done some work on that, and we've discovered that the school committee has the ability to develop a tuition revolving fund, create a tuition revolving fund, so that money coming from Dover can go into that tuition revolving fund, and the school committee can use it without further appropriation to spend on special education expenses. Actually, the suggestion came from the Sherborn, the interim finance director for Sherborn.
So that's because it comes from, it's for special ed, so it needs to stay in special ed?
Yes, and we have, and there is a section of the statute that allows the school committee to develop a tuition revolving account, which is allowable. So that was suggested by the interim finance director, and we did some more research on that. So we'll be bringing you a recommendation to establish that kind of a fund at the next meeting. So by using those 3 resources, now we determined our operating budget number by making a decision that we would be counting on using 60% reimbursement from circuit breaker to fund to help fund our out-of-district expenses. So all things, if everything went perfectly as as was known at the time of the budget, there would be approximately $28,000 remaining in the circuit breaker fund that theoretically would go back to the town. The problem is that we have experienced growth in out-of-district enrollment placements, which has caused a financial impact. So for discussion purposes, I'm assuming that we'll have to use the 70%. We'll have to use all of the circuit breaker funds to pay for our expenses. So after adding up these three funding sources, you'll note that as we stand now, we're subject, we have expenses, anticipated out-of-district expenses of $997,000. So we're looking at a $38,000 operating variance in out-of-district tuitions. So that's the financial piece. Now we have some options there. Fortunately, there is now a special education stabilization fund. And as we approach the end of the year, if we're not able to make up this $38,000 from the operating budget to pay for it, we can ask town meeting to appropriate that amount of money out of the special ed, recently established special ed stabilization fund. And this is just a perfect example of why that fund was established, to pay for unknown and special education expenses that that we really don't have control over. Now, I would tell you at this point in time, going back to one of the comments Dawn made and brought to your attention related to the operating budget, and there's about $40,000 operating positive variance in the salary lines. Unless there's an emergency of some sort that happens as we go through the year around personnel, that would be a source of funding to make up this difference so that we wouldn't have to go back to the stabilization fund. So if we finish the year with a $38,376 operating, net positive operating variance, we take care of this. It's done, it's taken care of. People understand what I'm saying? Okay. So for the time being, that's how we would plan to deal with that. I think that we can take care of it through the operating budget, and we'll just monitor that very carefully. However, as we look at the November report, the December report, we'll monitor it. If we think that there's a chance that we have to go to the stabilization fund, I will provide you with a recommendation to put a placeholder warrant article for the Springtown meeting. So we want to make sure that we at least have a placeholder in there in case we do need to seek money from the stabilization fund and we're not missing the warrant deadline to do so.
We should probably always do that. But really, every year we should probably
that
have a
may affect,
placeholder there because we don't know what's going to happen.
That may well be a good practice especially now that we have that stabilization fund established.
But that stabilization fund is based on excess circuit breaker money.
From FY16. Yes.
Going forward.
Absolutely.
So if we start spending the full boat, then we're not going to have a whole lot in the stabilization fund.
No, but this may be one of those years where we don't. Maybe next year there is excess money that can then be appropriated back in. But the intention here would be to make every effort to make this difference up through the operating budget. That's how we're going to proceed. So in terms of the numbers, if you look at the first document that goes along with this, you'll notice at the top, it was supposed to be copied in color, but I don't think it came out. I would like to just emphasize that the information that's on this document in the form that you have should be treated as confidential information, and this is confidential information for members only. The information that we just shared, the memo regarding the financial impact is not confidential. That certainly is public. But what you see, these are the list of the regional students.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
This is not confidential?
It is
Oh, really?
confidential. That's why it says at the top, confidential for members only.
Got
And I wanted to, the in-district one is not.
it. Got it.
But for out of district, if someone got a hold of this document and really wanted to try to find out who the individual students were, they might be able to do that. So I just wanted to emphasize that members are, school committee members are certainly eligible to see this information. You just need to keep it confidential. So what this does is identify by grade level at the region, 6 through 12 plus. So 12 plus means students who are continuing to receive services. They have not yet received a diploma, and it may very well be that because of their disability, they will not receive a diploma. And it's likely that the district will continue to provide services until they reach the age of 22. So this lays out for you students by grade level, where they're placed, and what the tuition charge is. You'll see some charges for additional related services. Those are for related services cost above and beyond the tuition amount. Related services are things like occupational therapy services, physical therapy services, speech and language services. In some cases, it could be psychological services, etc. And then you see the tuition amount. For the region, you can see where the current tuition is expected to be $874,000. We budgeted $574,000. You'll also note that of the 14 students, 5 students are new to out-of-district placements since the budget was passed last year. And so these are students that have come on the books as out-of-district students since April of last year. Last year, we were projecting that there would be 13 out-of-district, I have that number. We were projecting 12 regional out-of-district students. The good news is that 3 of those 12 we projected actually were either brought back or stayed in district. So that's good news. The bad news is that 5 additional students were added to the rolls for a net gain of 2.
Is that particularly volatile? That seems like an awful lot of change, or is that typical? Because if that's typical, then that makes me more nervous.
So it has not been typical for Sherborn over the last 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That has not been. This was an unusual year, and because, if I'm not mistaken, all of the students new to out-of-district placement did not move into town. We did not inherit them, so to speak. Those are students who were in our schools last year.
And there are no Pine Hill kids out of district?
Next page shows the elementary, I'm sorry. That's how it's organized right now. So that's the high school, the regional.
Okay.
And the elementary, there are 2 students on out of district. We were projecting 1. And a new student did, again, go on a plan. This was not a move-in. This was a current student whose circumstances changed. And again, that's, last year there were 2 elementary students. I would say to you, with the population that we have at Pine Hill, 2 out-of-district students is a low percentage. So we're still, in terms of that, we're doing well. Unfortunately, this was not anticipated at the time. So I believe it's important. I'm not sure school committee members have received this level of detail in the past on out-of-district students. But I think it's important that you do receive this level of detail, because as we go through the budget process, in terms of building FY18, you'll have context for the numbers, but also as we go through our continued monitoring of the FY17 budget through this year, you also have context there. So I hope you find this helpful.
Well, this is great from a budget standpoint. I mean, we don't know specifically, but you can have some idea of the projections of kids that are going to be out of the system and the ones that are going to stay in until they're 22 or whatever the age is. I'm just kind of curious, for a new placement in the 11th grade, do you see most new placements like in 6 and 9, or it doesn't?
It really does vary. I don't see trends like that at this point, even though I have looked for those trends. I can't say that that's like what's happening.
But just in general, if kids are out of district,
I would say in general, given my practice in the field, I would say that students tend to go out in middle school and high school for social emotional reasons.
Okay.
At a higher percentage. You know, you kind of build a program for the student with autism more, you know, and you can grow that program for the kids throughout time. But the social emotional volatility of middle school and high school, we see an increase.
This is very helpful, I think.
And then the last, yes, I'm sorry. It was but that. So this sheet just gives you an in-district, provides in-district numbers by town and grade for our students who are on an IEP. And one of the things we're looking at right now is that this represents the number of all students who are being serviced by an IEP. We have a number of students, especially at the elementary level, that are on an IEP but might receive only occupational therapy services or speech and language services. And again, and we'll be looking at those numbers and breaking those numbers out as well. In my experience, it's really helpful for administration to understand those numbers, because when you look at them in total, for example, there were 54 students on an IEP. Does that mean that our 4 special ed teachers are all working, with those 54 students? Some are not. Some are just working with our related services specialists. So when we look at all the details of programming and the kind of services that we're trying to make improvements on, that's important data for us to have and understand. Again, as we look at creating programs and then understanding the resources we have available to really be able to provide the level of services we want. So that's that. With the budget, first draft of the budget, which will be a major focus of our next meeting. There will be an enrollment section, and in addition to this information, there'll be more detailed information about the number of ELL students. Our METCO population we always report on, that'll be included. And I'm hoping or anticipating a narrative that provides, for people interested, a narrative that provides some more perhaps in-depth analysis of last year's numbers versus this year's numbers, and what that is made up of in terms of out-migration versus in-migration. Do we see a lot of students leaving Sherborn? The data that I've seen suggests no. Once families move into town, at least from the last 2 years, it looks like it's pretty stable. We do have people move out, of course, but
Can't sell their house.
yeah. The difference between in-migration and out-migration is really at a pretty high level. So,
All right, thank you. That was very helpful, I think. So we're ready for item 10, which is brief, I think.
yes.
Budget development guidance.
Yeah, so this is an agenda item that has come before the school committee for a number of years, I believe. It comes before the school committee prior to the administration putting together and presenting a first draft budget. It gives members an opportunity to tell us what your priorities are, what you'd like to see as priorities or areas of focus in building the FY18 budget.
So if people have ideas after they leave tonight, they can get them to me and I'll get them to you. It's not like they have to
That sounds great.
think about right now.
Yeah.
I would just say this, and along with the enrollment, and it may not be necessarily for FY18, but the 40B projects that we have scheduled here, I haven't kept up a lot with that, but apparently the number of potential units is up to 200, and you may know 280 something. I mean, it's a lot. And some people in various committees were talking about getting an expert to give us some guidance on what that means. I mean, we can look at some people have put together some numbers that are probably pretty accurate, but it'd be nice to get some, I think, some real experience on what has come from these same types of projects in other towns, because that's a lot of units. I mean, it's a whole lot of units. So if this, I guess the question I'm asking, if this expert costs a little bit of money, would we be willing to put up some money? I assume with other the region or other groups to pay for something like that. I'm not asking for a specific amount, but would there be interest in that?
Explain that.
Yeah, just to try to get some like real numbers on what comes out of these specific projects and how many kids are associated with 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and that type of thing.
Yeah, to educate our planning ability.
Okay, because it could be. Okay. So anybody have any specific items? If not now, you can get it to me later that we don't normally go over. I would say, Bill, that we don't normally cover in the budget, or specific items you want addressed in more detail. Anybody, just for in this, yeah, for consideration of time, if you guys are just going to get that. Consent agenda. Do we need to recognize the Metco committee to thank Needham Bank? Do we need to do anything? Or we just...
A letter on behalf of the school committee will be sent to Needham Bank.
Great.
Certainly expressing gratitude for the donation. I think it's worthy, certainly publicly, to highlight this donation. It's the second year that Needham Bank has donated funds specifically for enhancements to the METCO programs in each of the communities that have METCO programs where they have a branch office.
Awesome. I just moved my accounts to Needham from Bank of America, and they're great. So I guess
say the net worth must have just gone up tremendously.
Well, no, because I balance it with the pens I take off their desk. They have lots of free pens. So I guess the consent agenda, I get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second? Second. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right. Then item 12 is just communication for your reading pleasure.
Just, Greg, if I could just quickly, I will be very brief. The memo in there from the commissioner providing an update on educator evaluation and possible changes to the state regulations. I want to just bring that to your attention. The commissioner will, at the end of this month, propose a change in the regulations that eliminates the impact on student learning rating. That was part of the new educator evaluation system that came into place officially in Dover Sherborn, the 13-14 school year, I believe. And he indicates in this memo the rationale behind that. But that just circles back to the conversation, the very brief conversation about QPOs. And depending on whether the board, the DESI board, approves the recommendation to change the regulations, there'll be a period of time when those have to be, they need to be promulgated, open for public comment. But probably won't be till the beginning of the year, maybe February, before we see what exactly those changes are. It would be timely, I think, at some point near the end of the school year for the group, or a new group, or the same group that worked on educator evaluation the last few years. There was a working group. May want to reconvene to consider the new regulations if there needs to be changes to our current practice. And that would be a good time, frankly, to revisit the QPO piece. We'll have more data and more information, based on this year's experience. But the issue of is there enough of a core group that would like to be QPOs to really meet what the original idea was for those QPOs, maybe something the districts have to reconsider and maybe move in another direction. But I think it would be timely at some point near the end of the year to put that working group back together.
Sounds good. Items for the November meeting, again, in the interest of time, so just get something to me. The idea was to make November mainly about the budget. We didn't have a meeting scheduled for December because that was going to be superintendent search, but I think we probably need to have a meeting in December, and we're thinking about having maybe a morning budget meeting only. After we get to work on next month, we'll have time to process it and talk about it, because we do have to vote a budget of some sort before January 1st is the town bylaw.
We have to send a budget number.
Right.
To town.
A budget number, but it really doesn't have to be anything in particular because it's just a number. They've got to have it. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you all for coming, especially Karen and Colin, Christine and Barbara and Jackie. Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.